kind of just take the diet you're already eating, because everyone has their own preferences, right? It's like some people like fruit, some people don't, some people like this, some people don't, whatever. Take what you're eating, get rid of the most processed parts of it. So that could be bread, it could be tortillas, it could be pasta. Hopefully it's not just like pure junk and like McDonald's. Like, I mean, you might not be listening to this podcast if you're just eating that all day, but just take the most processed part of your diet and replace that with more animal foods.
Let's ditch the quick fix and dive into today's conversation. Welcome, everybody. My guest today is Brian Sanders. Brian is the filmmaker behind the feature-length documentary Food Lies and the host of the Peak Human podcast. He graduated from UCLA with a degree in mechanical engineering. Brian works as a health coach at Evolve Healthcare and co-founded the health education company Sapien. He also works to spread the awareness of regenerative agriculture and increase access to well-raised animal products through his company, Nose to Tail. And you have a lot more to offer, Brian. I'm looking forward to this conversation, so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much.
Could you, kind of go into a little bit of how'd you go from engineering into being into healthcare and then specifically into the type of healthcare coaching that you're in?
Yeah, I didn't see this coming at all. I was actually into film growing up and always making videos and just taking all the classes in high school. And then I got into mechanical engineering school at UCLA, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll do something to do with special effects or something. And, I actually did work in the entertainment industry. I built rides for Universal and Disney and did some really cool stuff. Then I got into tech. Actually, I switched careers into tech. And then I kind of found my way into health by way of changing my own health. I had my own really health journey where I thought I was fine. I was kind of like everyone else, their late 20s. I just turned 30, starting to get the dad bod, had all these different ailments that I thought were normal part of, it's like, oh, you're getting older. You just kind of have bad joints and you have acid reflux and heartburn and you have allergies and you just like don't feel great every day at 2 p.m. And then I changed my diet and all those went away. Even the allergies, I was like, this is insane. It sounds fake that you could just get rid of allergies. Well, it turns out maybe if you're just not eating all these inflammatory foods and just grains and bread and seed oils and all this processed food, that your body has enough immune system basically left over to not have to deal with the allergies or actually be able to deal with the allergens and not have them affect you is what I mean. So had my own personal journey. My parents had actually tragic situation, lost both my parents around that same time, around 30. And that obviously woke me up. And that kind of showed me how our health paradigm was so wrong, because they did all the right things. We did the government recommendations. We did the food pyramid, the My Plate, all that stuff. We ate the heart healthy whole grains, we avoided red meat. We avoided saturated fat. We ate plenty of fruits and vegetables and the whole thing. We didn't eat out at restaurants. And I just don't think that's a way to go at all. I think that's not how a human can thrive. They can survive on that diet, but they ended up with all these health issues. They basically, looking back, I could see they had pre-diabetes and they had all these other problems and no one told them that they had them. And then, Alzheimer's and cancer. And so that's just kind of the classic story in modern times where people just get these and then they die and everyone's just like, well, that's how it goes these days. It's like
it's a sad story for sure. You hit on a couple things there, and one of the things I think is important for people to understand, and in having these kinds of conversations, is that just because you have more birthdays doesn't mean that you're anatomically that much older. Anatomically, your body's always rebuilding, repairing itself. There isn't any bone tissue in your body more than 7 to 10 years old. Hair and skin and everything regrows and repairs. So, that's kind of a concept that people, I think, really need to appreciate. And you kind of hit on it. When you're eating some of these foods that are inflammatory, you are going to have a reaction to it, especially when we're eating them out of balance, compared to 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, that kind of a thing. And so it is a tragic story because people are always trying to do what the institutional direction gives them. And unfortunately, we continue to find out that at the very best, it's outdated.
Yeah, and at the worst, it's purposely kind of wrong for the benefit of big food or just corn, wheat, and soy. That just the fact that the U.S. has all this land and they want to do something with it, and uh, government programs that can be affordable. Yeah, there's all these rabbit holes you can get into when you're looking at how we got to this weird dietary framework.
Yeah, and then you hit it. I'm in agreement. I think there's just the special interest. Maybe at the time they felt like it not only was a good moneymaker, but it was also good for the health of the nation. But now it's pretty well established that it's not. But the message isn't getting out well. So you'll continue to help give us some information today that will help that imbalance there. If you've listened to this podcast, you know how often ozone therapy comes up. I personally have the Simply O3 Complete Kit and use it as a preventative measure or when I come down with something. So whether it's ozone therapy at home or in your clinic, Simply O3 has equipment for your needs. If you are healing chronic illness or biohacking for optimal health, Simply O3 will make getting started with ozone therapy super easy. Go to simplyo3.com or call 844-655-2524. Use code FIX to get 10% off. That's www.simplyo as in oxygen 3.com.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I'm making a 6-part series about it. So it used to be a feature-length film and it turned into a 6-part series. So it's called Food Lies. And that is, yes, that's kind of my main driving force these days until we finish it, and kind of guides all my work with Peak Human and the podcast, and even Nose to Tail. Why I even started my company Nose to Tail was because I understood the power of regenerative agriculture, and like this is part of the solution. But yeah, I'm definitely we can get into all these topics because that's what the whole 6-part series is about, is where we went wrong with these dietary guidelines and how to kind of claw back from them.
Awesome. So yeah, wherever I thought it might be good to start right into a little bit of the concept of animal-based nutrition, and yeah, kind of weave into that what you're doing with Food Lies as we go through. I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I do kind of call it animal-based nutrition, ancestral health, I guess you could call it, which was just kind of naturally animal-based because this is what we had available to us and what we knew was healthy. Animal foods were always prized. It's just funny that we have to have this animal-based new like paradigm, or like it's like this new concept when it's the oldest concept. But because we've gone so far off track, we have to have this whole renaissance of this information. And so, yeah, I don't even think it should be called animal-based. It's just, this is what humans should eat. That's what I call it, sapien. This is like a sapien way of living. Sapien, it's just like Homo sapiens evolved eating all kinds of animal foods, whether it be large animals. Like we would be getting giant mastodons and woolly mammoth and giant sloths and all these things that were once these megafauna in North America. They're all over the world.
Right.
And this is what we ate. And I mean, then we ate fruits, and we found honey, and we ate some tubers and maybe some herbs, but it was basically all sorts of animal nutrition, whether big or small. It could go down to little tiny gecko. If we had to eat salamanders, we probably ate salamanders. We ate fish, we ate eggs, we ate organ meats, we ate fat, we ate once we started figuring out dairy, we got raw dairy. I'm wearing a raw milk shirt actually. So this is just what we ate. And then we had different sources of plant foods that helped us when we couldn't get animals, or just complemented our diets when we had animals. I mean, why not? It's tasty. It's delicious. We didn't have a food industry back then, poisoning us basically with all their processed foods. So we could eat all kinds of plant foods, but we also were very thoughtful about how we prepared the plant food. So I'm kind of jumping to almost another topic is, well, okay, if animal foods are so great, or, what about plant foods, or what about, it's just hard for some people to digest, to use a food pun, is that plant foods could be bad for us, because the whole mainstream paradigm is that they're magical and we should all be plant-based. And the more plant-based you are, the healthier you are. And I just don't agree with that. So tell me where you want to go with this, because
Yeah,
it's
I
a
like
big
it.
subject.
I like where we're going, and yeah, there's a lot there. So, the animal kind of concept, I agree. It's not really that new. It's something that we as humans have been doing for quite a long time. But not all protein is created equal these days. They're just like the plants. There's so much interference with the quality of animal, and plant food, that it makes a huge difference. So not all beef is the same kind of a deal, and not all carrots are the same, depending on pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, all the different things. And in that, seasonal eating is, I think, really important too. I think that you really do a good job of trying to help people consider the eating seasonally and locally when it comes to either of those. So I know I didn't make it any easier to simplify the topic, but
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good point. So it does tie a lot of things together. I talked about plant anti-nutrients. That shouldn't be a problem, really, because throughout history, we did eat seasonally and locally. And if we did find some sort of ancient plant, so the wild mustard plant was the basis of all of our brassica family, kales, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, all these type of things all came from the wild mustard plant. So this was this tiny little thing. So for one, that just tells you how different our food supply is. And not that these foods are all just, poisonous or anything, but it's just, we didn't have these around until the last 100 years. I just figured out broccolini only came out in like the 92 or 98 or something. It was crazy. I'm like, oh, we just invented this thing.
right.
So we didn't have all these. We had maybe a stringy little mustard plant that maybe was a garnish, or it's like, oh yeah, let's grab some of these and we could cook it with our meat or something. So, or even if we did find some ancient vegetables, I mean, there wasn't rows and rows of them. There wasn't many of them actually, vegetable wise. So these plants have anti-nutrients in them that block nutrient absorption. And I don't know if you've covered this before, but it means, it's their defense mechanism. It's the plant's defense mechanism.
Yep. Like oxalates and things of that nature.
Phytates, phytic acid, lectins.
Yep.
Yes, there's a whole host of these that block nutrient absorption. They can cause gut problems. They're just all kinds of problems with them because we're eating them in such high amounts. And also, and we're not eating them seasonally. So in the past, we could have just eaten a bunch of them and then they would have been gone. And then we would have maybe not had them again for 10 months. And so your body could clear them.
Right. Yeah. There's a complexity there. And we just are too used to eating what we want whenever we want, right?
That's what modern life is all about, is every second get what you want. And that's actually, if you like zoom out, even like kind of like the psychological side or social, economic side, or societal norm side, I think that is one of the big problems. Just completely jump to the 10,000 30,000 foot view, is that people just want whatever they want whenever they want, instant gratification. They want something cheap that tastes good. And that's almost the biggest problem.
It's huge. And that is kind of the thing, just that's the whole idea, when we have these conversations about they're trying to get that quick, that mentality, the fast foods, everything is just really quick. And then you eat this diet that's not good for you and you get sick, and then you want to get a quick fix for the, the illnesses that you have. But I am kind of going down another rabbit trail there. So.
Well, yeah. We can go back. So back to the plant versus animal foods, because it doesn't have to be a war. It doesn't have to be a war, but we just need to know the difference. And so there are such thing as plant anti-nutrients. I found a vegan website that warns them all about it. And it warns them, do not eat like tons of raw kale and raw spinach. You're going to get a kidney stone. This is oxalates. This is high oxalates. And I kind of made a mistake and was eating tons of those raw. And I don't think it served me well at all. And I did way better when I stopped. And people need to be thoughtful about plant foods in general. And I think, I don't know if this is controversial, but I think plant foods are kind of neutral in a sense, in the grand scheme of things. Someone just brought this up recently because I did this post a couple of years ago. I think this is really interesting, that Animal foods are kind of a plus one. They have all the bioavailable protein and nutrients, and that like pretty much all of them are like a plus one. Plant foods to me are pretty neutral. They're not giving us as much as we think. I said they were built up as this superfood, and you're not actually absorbing all these nutrients. They don't actually have that many nutrients to begin with. They're not complete proteins, all these things. I think of plant foods as almost the fallback foods, or just a supplemental source of energy from clean sources like fruit. They're kind of neutral. I mean, and then so it's a zero, and then a negative one would be all the processed foods.
Huge.
And bread, and people don't understand that bread and pasta are processed foods. Some people don't understand that. They think, oh yeah, I don't eat Twinkies, I don't eat McDonald's, I'm super healthy. And they're eating just bags of pasta and bags of bread and all this stuff. I'm like, no, that's a processed food. That's a negative one, I think. So you kind of look at generally like that. Again, I guess I shouldn't make it into a war and say that plant foods are neutral. I just kind of think that they're not doing as much as people think, but they're not hurting people unless you're chugging raw kale and spinach every day.
Yeah. So an op-ed on me would be, we just don't know what it was like for some of those vegetables, like you're saying, the tubers and things of that nature, just how good they were before all the processing got in there. And when you're talking about all these pastas and breads, even the healthy ones, it's really hard to know for sure if glyphosate wasn't in their history or any of the other, even if they're non-GMO, it's really hard to find the real certified organic. And if that certified organic field was next to a farm that's, spraying glyphosate, there's the wind blows, kind of thing.
Well, even if they didn't have that, I still don't think just the nature of how refined those foods, pastas and bread, there's a difference between like acellular and multicellular carbohydrates. So it's like when you refine flour down that much, it's just like in the literature, it just affects your body differently. Your body has a much higher insulin and glucose reaction to that. And, all these hormones in your gut are released differently if they're that refined. That's why people, it's a classic example, like the difference between eating an apple and drinking apple juice. It's right. Totally different. It's like you want your carbohydrates or your plant foods in their whole food matrix. When they're in their whole food matrix, it slows down absorption. You're not getting this quick shot of sugar to your body.
Right.
So that there's so many nuances here, but
that's a very good point right there. I think that you had indicated in one of the documentaries or the podcast that I watched, trying to get back to eating that whole food, because yes, an apple is definitely different than apple juice. I try to get my patients to understand that basically if you drink a glass of apple juice or a glass of orange juice, you're going to shut down your immune system for about 12 hours because that's what that sugar will do to your immune system. And then you don't get the fiber, you don't get the gut health, that really is important when you eat a plant. It gives you some fiber that can help how the body eliminates. I think, but eating to the satiation kind of concept is something you've kind of emphasized quite a bit. I think that's an important part of what you're saying here.
Satiety is huge. I'm kind of obsessed with it because no one wants to be fat and sick, yet we're all here, and then the newest numbers are actually up to 93% of the US is not metabolically healthy. So this gets into the calorie balance paradigm. If it's as simple as calorie balance, everyone would, assumably just figure it out. Right. But it's about so much more than that. So I'm leading to this satiety thing. So we have, no one wants to overeat. Right. But yet we have, right, as a society. So why? The question is why? People with this eat less, move more, stupid, meaningless, it doesn't help anyone. Eat less, that's just meaningless. Or it's just saying like, get rich by making more money than you spend. Meaningless. Why? The big question is why? Why do people eat too much? And if you're fat, if you're overweight, it's by definition, you've eaten too much per your energy expenditure. But why? Why? I'm emphasizing it a lot because it's all that matters. It's satiety. It comes down to satiety. Basically, if someone eats more than they should have, that means that they weren't satiated correctly, right? It's very simple, actually, when you think about it. Losing weight is a battle of hunger. And the worst thing you can do is just tell someone to cut the calories of the same bad foods they're already eating. they're eating these low satiety, low nutrition, inflammatory foods, and then they're just going to eat less of them. You're just getting less protein, you're getting less nutrients, and you're already lacking in protein and nutrients from these processed foods or just lower quality foods. So eating less of those is the worst thing you can do. What you need to do is figure out how I can give my body the protein and nutrients it needs and the satiety, because those go hand in hand. You are full because you have the protein and nutrients you need, and the energy. Obviously, you need the energy that goes along with these foods to get you through the day. But if you eat the correct foods that have the proper satiety, then you will naturally be full, and you will naturally not eat too much. Right. And I think that's the biggest problem. It's this battle of hunger. It's if you're eating the wrong foods, they're highly processed, they have low nutrients, low protein. This all goes hand in hand with being low in satiety, which will make you eat them again and again and be hungry a couple hours later and then have some more of them. And I just think that that's like the easiest way to figure out what went wrong. Is when we had all these highly processed foods come in, they just don't have the protein, nutrients, or satiety.
Yeah, and then they're interrupting the natural limbic system. It's like an addiction, and that creates part of that negative cycle that you're talking about, where you're not really reaching that satisfaction, point. And your body just keeps on saying it. And then when you try to switch out, right at the start of the interview, you were talking about, hey, I was having these joint pains, I was having allergies, I was having all these things. And then when I got rid of all these inflammatory foods, like, wow, it takes a little time for that to happen, of course. And sometimes people are not patient enough to, hey, really get rid of these inflammatory foods, start eating the quality foods. Have you seen that in your experience?
Yeah, well, it is super hard. It's a journey you have to go on, and it was a journey that I went on, and I guess it was 8 years ago when I first started like really waking up. Maybe I guess it's not. I just turned 39, so you could call it 9 years I've been on this journey. If we just call it when I was 30, it's not like the first day I just was eating like grass-fed, amazing regenerative meats and like cooking for myself, and it is a journey. But yeah, I mean, people will, I think, see the results, and it's like this compounding effect, and you just feel better and better. And also I should throw in, it's not all about satiety, because I did mention inflammatory foods or all these problems with certain foods. I think there's just really just like two main points when you're thinking about health and what to eat and evaluating foods. And one is the satiety aspect, which involves the protein and the nutrients and the nutrient value and the processing and all that. But then also there's the like inherently like bad substances that disrupt your gut and your body, right? So that's the other side. So then it's the glyphosate, it's all the fungicides, pesticides, it's herbicides, it's gluten, maybe for a lot of people. It could even be milk proteins for some people. So all these things that additionally affect your body. So even if you were to eat satiating foods that were pretty whole foods, you could still have problems though, because you could be eating pure spinach and kale, and it could be covered in glyphosate, and it could have all these anti-nutrients. But you're saying, hey, I'm eating whole foods. Most whole foods basically have the correct satiety inherently, but you could still have problems. So I just, want to make sure there's two sides of this. And I think generally it's to do with the gut and it's to do with energy, right? And those are like the two main problems. I think all disease really is a combination. It's either one, the other, or both. Right? It's the problems, energy. So energy meaning eating too much energy, right? Meaning insulin problems and overstuffed fat cells and all these, downstream effects to type 2 diabetes and or gut problems. So I don't know if this fits your paradigm, but I just think it's just like, it's these two things and that's it. And that's it. Environmental toxins may, can fit into that would affect your gut and your body cells. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I like it, and one of the maybe it's in the same vein, recognizing the complexity of everything, in food and in human physiology. It's nice to boil it down to some some concepts that are very simple to understand, which is eat clean, and try to get as close to as whole food as you possibly can. And then the body will adapt to that. It's going to adapt to what you're doing negatively. It'll adapt to what you're doing positively. And that's a simple concept. It's like drink more clear water. Don't worry about the chemical structures and all the different things that are going on. Let's just start there,
Yeah.
and then we can build on that. So I like the concept of trying to understand, how to get satiated and how to utilize the best foods for that. And I feel bad because there's a lot of people I know that use the caloric count as the way to be healthy. And I've been trying to, encourage them to, not make that their primary, focus. It fails in so many ways. And you've pointed out a couple of those.
Well, I'd love to talk about that. You could do a whole podcast on how calorie counting fails. But people will say, hey, but I counted calories and lost weight. And I'm like, absolutely possible. 100%. If you're going to eat less food, 100%, you can lose weight, but that doesn't mean you're going to be healthy. That doesn't mean it's a long-term solution. It doesn't mean you're actually getting enough protein and nutrients. It doesn't mean anything. There's a guy that did the Twinkie diet. He was some professor, did it as like a goof. And he ate, 1,400 calories of Twinkies for a few days and lost weight. Who cares? Maybe it was a week. That doesn't mean anything. He wasn't saying this is a healthy diet. And like, right. Really your body, your body doesn't have a calorie sensing mechanism, really, right? It doesn't just like sense calories, because then again, like I said, everyone should be fine. If we had a calorie sensing mechanism, you wouldn't be hungry and people would not overeat. We don't have a calorie sensing mechanism. We have basically a satiety. We have a hunger sensing mechanism, and we have nutrients sensing mechanism. You know what I mean? Like our body kind of inherently knows about protein and nutrients and what we need, and it eats to get to a certain amount of protein and nutrients. This is kind of getting into the protein leverage hypothesis, which I really like, which they found in all animals. They've studied that the animals, they started in crickets, and they found they would eat enough, they would eat the certain food they were provided to get this amount of protein. And if they diluted that food and put extra grains or whatever this cricket feed was, they ate more of it to get to the same amount of protein. They did this in rats and mice, the rodent studies, they did it a little bit in some human studies. But
that's interesting.
It's all about, but they eat to the same protein. So to say it another way, if this makes sense to people, no matter what, your body wants a certain amount of protein and nutrients. If you dilute the food down, then you have to eat more of that food to get the same amount of protein and nutrients. And I think that's what's happening in general in the world. It's like, what is processed foods? It's just adding extra energy. Whether it be seed oils or, plant fats or refined grains or sugar. They just add these 3 highly processed ingredients to foods. They make them taste good, supposedly. They make them last longer. They make them shelf stable. They make them highly profitable, actually, because these are really cheap ingredients. And people eat them. And all it's done is dilute out all the good protein and nutrients and give you too much energy. It's like, it's almost a little simple equation of just protein and nutrients to energy. And so it makes sense why people overeat. It makes sense why we've ended up this way. And that's why it doesn't really matter about calories. It matters about this, because that's what your body wants. It doesn't care about just calories. It cares about nutrients and protein and energy that it can actually use and actually burn and make ATP.
Yeah, and that's awesome. It leads me to the question of, and you've hit a couple of points already, but why more meat? Why more protein? And you're kind of hitting on that. And in the processing of things, we're talking about how the food is processed. It's not good when it gets into your body, but your body's processing it has to work more, right? That's what you're kind of talking about right now. When you bring these things in, the pancreas has to work harder, the kidneys have to work harder, the liver has to work harder. All these different processes that go on in your body from processed food is as inefficient as it can be.
Well, it's taxing. It's taxing on your body because it's basically like eating carcinogens or something. Like even meat, like you don't want to roast meat to a crisp, right? That it has heterocyclic amines and these like carcinogenic compounds. It's like your body has to process them. So it's a bad kind of processing and extra work and immune system depletion, if you could kind of think of it broadly like that, right? It's like it has to do more work to detoxify these things.
Right.
And there's actually a good type of processing in your body that relates to protein, and it's a thermic effect of food, the TEF. Different foods have different thermic effects. So it's actually in a good way, animal protein has a higher TEF. It has a higher thermic effect, and it actually takes more energy for your body to break it down. And that's one of the benefits of eating protein and eating meat, is the satiety. So it's like it has a lot of nutrients. It has fat and protein and all these nutrients that you need, but it also it keeps you full for a long time. And it's almost like a hack where your body has to just kind of work a bit harder to even digest it. So
it's more nutrient dense.
It is. And so these all go together into why someone might want to eat more meat. I did a whole presentation on why we should be eating more meat, not less. And it kind of debunked a lot of the vegan propaganda and the anti-meat propaganda, but it was partly saying, hey, we've eaten animal foods for all of history. If you're overweight, I think one of the best interventions is to just eat more meat. It's such a simple thing to do, because you're really just upping your protein and nutrients and getting super good source of bioavailable protein nutrients, and cutting out, if you're eating more meat, that means you're eating less of something else. And so I'd encourage you, my simplest and best diet advice is kind of just take the diet you're already eating, because everyone has their own preferences, right? It's like some people like fruit, some people don't, some people like this, some people don't, whatever. Take what you're eating, get rid of the most processed parts of it. So that could be bread, it could be tortillas, it could be pasta. Hopefully it's not just like pure junk and like McDonald's. Like, I mean, you might not be listening to this podcast if you're just eating that all day, but just take the most processed part of your diet and replace that with more animal foods. And you're completely changing the ratio, and you're shifting your diet in a huge way towards protein, nutrients, and satiety.
That's awesome. That's a very good tip. Hey, everybody, I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Brian Sanders. We're going to continue next week and touch on a few more topics related to animal-based nutrition and regenerative agricultural farm practices, as well as how to follow up with Brian. Now, if you're ready to take the next step on your own health journey and becoming your health advocate, head on over to Ditch the Quick Fix, and I will see you next time on Ditch the Quick Fix with Brian Sanders. Have a great day.